Let's make some gourmet cookies, as in browned butter toffee chocolate chip cookies. Oh my goodness, that's a mouthful, but what's not to like? If you watch my previous video on how to brown butter, do that first. Brown your butter, set it aside, because it does need to cool some, 125 degrees. Let's do our prep work for our cookies. I like to add almond ROCA to my cookies. If you're allergic to almonds, of course, don't add that. Get some SKOR bars. Get 2 of your regular size SKOR bars or HEATH bars. If you want to put in extra, well, that's my secret. I put in 4, but you don't have to. You can put in 2, or the almond ROCA. Do not use your food processor to cut up the almond ROCA. It just works it too much, even on just barely pulsing it. So use your chef's knife, cutting board, and your almond ROCA. I put about 15 of the almond ROCA in my recipe, and then I'm just going to cut up these last few, and you're just going to cut them up into nice chunks. Be careful of your fingers. Get your claw going so you don't end up chopping off your fingertips. Nobody likes fingertips in their cookies. Doesn't taste good, right? And we're just giving it a rough chop. I don't want it pulverized, which is what happened in my food processor. So learn from my mistake. I am going to put that in the pulverized almond ROCA in my cookies because, well, why not? But I also want some chunks in there. So there you have it. You have your candy ready to go into your cookie mixture. That's our prep. And there's always one little piece left for the chef, right? Yum. All right, let's get our bowl to throw our trash in, right? Don't forget our little pool to throw our unwanted guest in. All right, we'll set that aside. Our next prep is, if you're not using chocolate chips and you're using maybe a candy bar, you would want to cut that up too. A rough chop. Any kind of candy bar that you like. I am using chocolate disc. I just like the way they melt better. They tend to spread out in the cookie, so you get a lot more chocolate, and they stay a little bit softer. So that's what these are. They're chocolate disc. And you can get them at your local gourmet store, not at Walmart. Unfortunately, wish it were easy to find, but it's not. So if you already prepped your candy, set that aside too. Your chocolate chips, you can use bagged chocolate chips. If that's all you got, use it. No problem. You will need a mixer for this, whether it be a stand mixer or a hand mixer. If you got a stand mixer, that's great because you can really work it. Take another bowl and whisk our flour and our baking soda and our salts together. So we want to whisk our flour, and that's 2 cups flour, 1 teaspoon baking soda, and it's going to be impossible to whisk our kosher salt and our smoked salt together. By the way, I'm using a half a teaspoon of kosher salt and about a 1/4 teaspoon of smoked salt. Smoked salt is exactly that, salt that's been smoked. You can get that at your local gourmet store. So we'll wait to put that in at the end. You see the little chunks left? That's why we always sift Add your salts in now, since they will not sift through the sifter. We're going to stir those and set them aside. It was 2 cups flour, 1 teaspoon baking soda, half a teaspoon of kosher salt, and roughly a 1/4 teaspoon of the smoked salt. If you are not using smoked salt, use 3/4 teaspoons of kosher salt. If you don't have kosher salt and you're using table salt, your regular salt that you use at the table, you would use 1/4 teaspoon plus 1/8 of a teaspoon. You always use half as much table salt than what you would use as kosher salt. All right, now this is mixed up, set it aside. In your bowl that you're going to use, either in your standing mixer or you're going to use a mixer to mix it up, a hand mixer, you add 1 cup of packed brown sugar. And it's exactly what it is, what it says. You put the brown sugar in it, you pack it nice and tight, you pack it down and you level it off. And then you try and get it out of it. There you go. It didn't want to come out, did it? And we add 1/3 cup white sugar. That's just your regular white granulated sugar. And your cooled browned butter. You can see the brown solids on the bottom. We want that because that's flavor. Just make sure you get those solids in there too. Yum. Good, delicious toffee flavor. Now, in a stand mixer, start it out on low and then work it up to medium. You will beat this. Use your paddle if you have a stand mixer. This works best. I wanted to show you what that looks like. That butter and those sugars. Smells really good. Of course, scrape your bowl. And now's the time to add your eggs. 2 eggs right into your bowl. And we're going to take it back and beat it until it really gets light colored. Okay, you see how the color has changed? Got that good and incorporated. Still smells great too. All right, now we're going to want to add our dry ingredients to our wet. This is where I want you to be really careful about mixing. It's easy to overmix. We want tender cookies, not tough cookies. And the more you mix it, the more aggressively you mix it, the more gluten you're going to create. And gluten's great when you're making bread. You want it to be chewy. But in cookies, you want it to be tender. So I'm just going to use my rubber spatula to incorporate my dry ingredients into my wet. And I'm not worried about it getting all totally mixed yet because I'm going to add other things and I don't want to overmix it. So you see there's just a little bit of flour clinging around, hanging around. That's okay. We're going to now add our almond ROCA and our chocolate chips. And I used 15 almond ROCAs chopped up for this recipe. And chocolate chips is 1.5 cups of your favorite kind of chocolate. I like to also just use a candy bar too. If you're not using almond ROCA, of course, get 2 single size SKOR bar or HEATH bar. Anything that has toffee in the center. The toffee chips that you can buy to use for baking, I find does not work out well. They're too small. They don't really stay nice and chunky in your cookie. And I'm disappointed in the way they turn out. You can really get a nice, good taste of that candy. All right. I have now gotten rid of any obvious signs of flour. Here's where it's going to take patience. I know I say it every time, but it's so worth it. You can bake these off now. After you have formed the cookie dough into a cookie, to your mound, and you put it on a parchment lined cookie sheet, you're going to want to put it at the very least into your refrigerator for 30 minutes. Do not press them down. Don't smash them down. Leave them in mounds because they will spread as they cook. If you want them to taste even better, wait overnight. Put them in the freezer and then cook them off. I'll show you how I mound these. Now, let's get to scooping. I just use an ice cream scoop. This is about a 1/4 cup size. And then I scoop out my cookies and put them right on my parchment lined pan. Now, in order to bake these off, you really want to keep them 3 inches apart all around if you can, because they really spread. So remember, you would bake these off at 375 degrees after your cookie dough balls have sat in the fridge for at least a half an hour. But, of course, I don't want to live like that. I want mine to turn out nice and chewy in the center. If you freeze all this overnight and then cook it that way, the center stays extra soft and chewy. Ugh, no danger of it getting to be too crispy. I will show you how to put them in a cookie sheet when you're going to bake them. I would cover this up now with saran wrap, some kind of, cling wrap, and put them in my freezer for 24 hours and then bake them the next day at 375. After I separate these dough balls more, I will show you how to place them. Don't cook them like this. It'll all run together and you'll just have a big mess. When it comes time to bake, you want to make sure they have enough room to spread. You can maybe get about, roughly 4 on your cookie sheet, and that gives them plenty of room to spread. You bake these between 10 to 11 minutes. And halfway through, I want you to turn your pan around in the oven, because ovens don't bake evenly. Sometimes the back of the oven is hotter than the front of the oven, and you want your cookies to come out even. So you would bake this at 375 between 10 and 11 minutes, and then cool it in the pan 5 minutes, and then place on a cooling rack each cookie. And I find you really got to let it cool about 10 minutes or more before you start to eat it. It really will, it just falls apart too easily if you don't. Okay, but right now, I'm putting them in the freezer. Trust me, it's worth the wait if you can handle it. Here you go, your finished product. I don't know if you can see in there, you can see the chocolate and the little bits of almond, and that's top. And you see they're just, they're so good. Nice and brown on the bottom and chewy in the middle. Ooh, look at that chocolate ooze. Yum. Delicious.